Hey there, bibliophiles and those raising bibliophiles. Are you looking for good books for your children to read, trying to figure out which ones are worth your time and which ones aren't? Well, join me today for a book review and decide if that book is something that should be added to your to-read list or your bad book list. Today's book review is Endling the First by Katherine Applegate. This is book 2 in the Endling series, and I'm going to start a little bit different this time. I'm going to read you a little opening of the book, and hopefully that'll whet some appetite for this particular book in this series. I have definitely enjoyed it. It is a fantasy series for ages 9 through 12. By Katherine Applegate. So earlier I did book 1, so if you haven't seen that, definitely go back and look at that. But here's a little teaser of book 2, and this will give you a great idea of some of the themes that are in this book. So while I know magic sometimes can be a no-go for many families, if that is not something that bothers you, then just continue listening and see if the book has more to offer for your family. So the book opens with the first chapter, Feel Fear, Choose Courage. I'm not brave, not bold, not a leader. I'm not remarkable in any way, to tell you the truth, unless you count the fact that I may well be the last member of my species, the Dairns and Endling. I can tell you what bravery looks like, though. Bravery is single-handedly fighting off a horde of venomous serpents in order to save a Dairn pup and her little Wubbock companion. I was that pup, and my savior was Cassandra Donati, my human leader and dear friend. I would like to be as daring as Kara, as certain as fair, but leaders like her are born, not made. My father, a brave and brilliant leader himself, loved wise sayings and proverbs. He used to tell me and my 7 siblings, feel fear, choose courage. That's what makes a leader, pups. Well, at least I perfected the fear part. I am deeply acquainted with the many symptoms of terror, the rippling fur, the icy blood, the frantic heart, and the unsheathed claws. So hopefully that is a little bit of a good teaser for you, the idea of where this book is going and a little bit of the writing style. So book 2 is definitely sort of picking up where book 1 left off. Bix is on a mission to still discover if she is the last of her kind, if she's truly an Endling. In this installment, she discovers twice that she is not the last Dairn after all, and that there are more of her species, but also that more species are sort of on the brink of extinction if this war that is prepared to take place actually happens. Bix and her friends are on their way to discover the floating sentient island that supposedly has more of these Dairns, the ones that like history and legend and lore has told her. So she is on a mission to see if this is really true and if they're really there. Readers are immediately immersed into the story. There's razor galls that are attacking them, so they have to run into a cave and hide. But when they're in the cave, they can't come back out. So they're like circling and going down into this cave, and they have to find a way out. Well, while they're down there, they find this subterranean world full of natrites, if I'm saying it correctly. It's fantasy, so a lot of this made up world and words, just trying to kind of figure out how to pronounce those. But anyhow, they're down there in this cavern, and these creatures say that they're going to kill them if they don't help them uncover these special items. So obviously they have no other choice. They're going to go and uncover these special items, which are actually like in a volcano. So Renzo is able to really help get those items, but they decide that they're not going to return with them. They actually find another exit and another out. So if you remember, Bix is able to tell lies, so she was able to sense that there really is another way out of this predicament that they're in, and so they keep the items. Some of them feel bad about it, some of them don't, but their plan is to use those items to help them on their mission and to keep moving forward. In one of the stops after they exit this sort of aspect of the story is a small village, and it's in this small village that they learn about the war and what's going on with the Murdano and the Dreylanders. And it's not exactly what they thought. The leader of the Dreyland is no more than actually one of Gambler's type, which is like a Flevet, if I'm saying that correctly. He is beyond rude and evil and terrible, and as much as Murdano is detested because he's awful, which we saw a little bit in book 1, this guy is like above and beyond that. So it's like a no-win situation. Like both are bad, but the Dreyland army is way worse than what they're dealing with. So they have to really stop what's going on. Despite the news, they continue on their way. They have many perils, which does result in the release of the traitor Luca. So if you remember from book 1, Luca was there and he ended up betraying them. Well, in this particular book, they come across him and he is now a slave, and they actually release him from slavery. And he kind of joins them for a little bit. And eventually they make it to Teruk, which is the sentient island. Maxon is from this island. He ends up joining them. There's a whole lot of other stuff that happens in the story. Luca dies as they have a battle or like a run-in with the Terramount. So there is a lot there. So I'm definitely skipping over a lot in this story, just trying to get to the essence of the story. So Maxon joins their group. He's obviously heartbroken. His dad dies in the midst of what's going on. Ultimately, they end up returning back to Nadera, and this is where Kara learns that her father has ailing health. And so now they know of another area where there are Dairns, and the group has to sort of divide. So Bix with Maxon and Tobble are on their way to go and make contact with these other Dairns, and while they're there, they realize they're being starved to death by men out in sea. And so there's a whole lot that goes on with that situation, and unfortunately, Maxon is taken captive, and Bix really starts to doubt her leadership and her ability to do what she's doing. And their horse is also killed in all of that. So if you have super sensitive children, especially about animals and if they're hurt, this is something to kind of make you aware of. We also see in the story where Kara has to give up her horse Felino, which we see a lot in book 1. And so the situation around that was actually quite sweet and tender, and it made me cry a little bit. So I definitely liked that. I mean, not that I like to cry, but I love that it developed that sort of sense in there. Like I mentioned before, there's definitely magic in this book. You have the theurgy that's continued to be presented throughout in reference to spells and enchantments. The volcano, there's objects, there's characters, there's even lands that are said to have elements or traces of this theurgy in there. So just to kind of keep that in mind, that's kind of built in throughout the story. There are some references to fate and higher power. Tobble at one point talks about how his species, they have this belief in a great painter in the sky sort of idea. And then Rezo responds that he doesn't believe in fate. Fate's for people who don't want to take responsibility for their lives. And then Bix, is really talking about fear, that we all have particular fears. One can be brave 9 times and be a coward the 10th time. And then that's true. So they're kind of battling with this idea of courage and fear and what all that means. One thing good about the series is that there's many themes presented that I think are great. So you saw the one from the beginning about fear and courage, and I kind of just talked a little bit about that some more. There are many parallels and ideas between a lot of the stuff you read by Applegate, where it's the idea of the value of life, both animal and human. And you definitely see that presented in the story. The idea that no species should be going extinct. Everyone plays their part. Everyone's important. Everyone has a purpose. And that idea is carried on throughout the series. You will see in the story, because there is war, there's a few descriptions. Definitely go and check out my written review to see if those are a little bit much for your reader, like when Luca dies and those sorts of things. So, 9 through 12 is a wide range, and children can be very sensitive to different things within that. So take that for what it's worth and kind of look through some of those comments or quotes that I pulled out, or details that I pulled out for you to kind of look at and just peruse those. They're in bulleted form, so hopefully that's easy for you to access and kind of look at and see if that's, too much or not for your reader. There are a few harmless mentions of a possible romantic relationship. Renzo clearly has a crush on Kara, but not explicitly stated. The animals are aware that there's something sort of going on, and that Renzo feels something for Kara. There is a mention of Maxon and Bix, that they create a nest and sleep in it for one night, but they're just, I guess, Dairns, mythical animals, but there's no relationship that really develops other than like kind of a friendship between them. Overall, I really enjoyed the series so far. I like the focus on the value of life for all the animals, the symbiotic relationship between living things, the need and desire to protect life at all costs, and the idea to stand and defend against evil when the odds even are against you. There's also a focus on the need for strength and truth throughout the story, and that truth gives strength, and also the loyalty of friends. So The importance of taking leadership roles when you're called upon, encouraged to stand even when you're fearful, are all great themes that are presented in this book. You can make a lot of connections between life, biblical truth could be connected to this if you want to do that with your readers. So overall, magic aside, if that's not for you, then obviously hope you probably didn't make it this far in the video, but if that is something that doesn't bother you, hopefully you can see that there are some other things and themes in the story that make the story valuable. So if you're looking for something to add to your to-read list, if you have already added book 1, I definitely would highly recommend book 2, and I would put that on my to-read list for 2025.